The first change of Versusia is one I can't really demonstrate effectively, and that is to her dash. There's always a delay in Granblue Fantasy vs. Rising for how soon a character can block out of their dash. It's not like Guilty Gear Strive where you can immediately cancel your dash into a block or you can faultless defense break or anything like that. It takes time for a character to be able to block out of a dash. For Versusia before, you only needed 15 frames after her dash started up in order to be able to block. They've almost doubled this now to 26 frames, meaning that Versusia is a lot more committal to her dash when she does decide to do it, which I think is a pretty big nerf to how she wants to try and move throughout the screen. It's more rewarding to try to poke her because once her dash gets going, it goes. So making it more unsafe on startup does a lot to dissuade Versusia from trying to run up at you. And I feel like this nerf is going to set the tone for what we're going to see throughout a lot of her kit in this patch. Another change I won't be able to demonstrate has to do with the downward hitbox of her standing light. It's been shortened. I haven't been able to find some situations or ranges where this is a change that I'm actually able to see and appreciate, but I imagine that this just probably means that there's probably going to be some things that she's not going to be able to check as well. If you're able to find a hitbox viewer for Granblue Fantasy vs. Rising, I highly recommend you go look it up and compare the sizes between this normal before the patch and after the patch. For a change I can actually demonstrate, it has to do with the clash level of her standing light. For whatever reason, Cygames and Arxis gave this medium priority, so this would clash with medium normals. This was kind of obnoxious because it's a relatively safe poke option to do, and when you're putting this out at neutral with a 7-frame startup, if the opponent swung with a more committal medium normal, you would just get a clash. The clash level has been reduced, so now if the opponent presses a medium normal, Versusia will no longer clash with it, instead she'll lose based on priority. This will do a lot to keep her in check when it comes to neutral situations. Now the opponent can pretty much safely press mediums against her at these ranges where far light would have been able to at least compete with those normals before. Crouch medium had its upper hurt box shortened a bit. I don't really have a good example to display this, but I'm going to notate it here anyway. Versusia has a lot of things I just don't have the ability to show y'all. Sorry about that. Versusia's dash attacks have a couple of complex changes going on, and I'm going to do my best to try and summarize and demonstrate them here. Let's start with dash light. For starters, Versusia's dash speed after frame 21 has been equalized. When you perform a dash light attack during the 21st to the 23rd frame of her dash, then the range of 6XL is increased, but if you do it from frame 24 onward, it's been reduced. So that's like a late dash 6L, that's like an early one. And I'm pretty sure frame 21 is about the point where you see that windbreak effect coming off from Versusia. Let's take a look at the current patch. It's hard for me to really appreciate a difference when it comes to 6XL, so maybe a qualified Versusia main can chime in the comments below. I think an easier for me to quantify, just because there's less jank, if you will, going on, is with her 6.6M and her 6.6 Heavy. If you perform it after the 21st frame, both versions go farther. So let's take a look at the medium. Just barely whiffs here on Gran, and her dash Heavy. It still reaches him. Compare that to the current patch. 6.6M actually reaches if you're able to start this from full screen. And 6.6 Heavy still reaches as well. I'm not sure if the 6.6 Heavy thing is going to come into play, but being able to threaten with 6.6M at that full screen distance, kind of nice once you get your dash immediately started up. So it's a nice little buff for Versusia. Versusia's jump medium has a couple of nice buffs. Previously, there wasn't really much to work with here, as you had 18 frames of hit stun against the opponent. Now the opponent is stunned for 25 frames, so an increase of 7 frames of hit stun. And in addition to that, the opponent is also launched more horizontally and less vertically. The patch doesn't say this to allow Versusia to get some new combo routing here. In my bit of testing, there actually seems to be some new potential off of some starters. This is a very simple idea for what it's possible for Versusia now with this change, so Versusia mains will have to drop the sauce. The JM buffs are namely there to offset some JH nerfs that Versusia also got. The lateral knockback has been increased. Previously, it knocked the opponent pretty much straight down. This was an ideal knockback for Versusia due to some combo routing she could use it for.
Great.
The horizontal knockback on this jump heavy has been increased. On a forward jump situation like that, it's hard to tell, but it's very apparent once I do that combo. As you can tell, you're not getting those triple strike sequences anymore off of that Samsara follow-up. So it's a pretty big nerf to Versusia in terms of her combo routing. So this is sort of the tone that we're going with here. She's getting some compensation buffs, but they're to offset these nerfs that ArcSys and Cygames are giving her. Celestial Strike, Versusia's 5U, once she has a stack of Celestial Dominion, has a couple of nerfs. Previously, it was +4 on block. In addition to that, if you're able to hit the opponent, they stayed on the ground. This is incredibly potent against a crouching opponent, as it meant that Versusia could get another triple strike sequence.
Great.
Celestial Strike's nerfs, though, become in the form of its block stun as well as its property on hit. On block, instead of being +4, it's now -4. So now Versusia has no incentive to spend this for a free plus on block situation. She has to use one of her special moves and burn a cooldown in order to do so. In addition to that, if she hits the opponent, they're full-blown launched, and in mid-screen, you don't really get a follow-up here, so it's only like a corner combo launcher. It's a pretty substantial nerf to Celestial Strike. Deadly Flare has some power adjustments going through it. Let's look at the medium version, which sees a couple of buffs. Previously, the startup was 29 frames? Fairly slow, but not bad. Additionally, at full screen, if the opponent was walking backwards, this move would whiff. This basically incentivized Versusia to use her heavy version in order to catch the opponent here. As you can see, it catches a crouching opponent, but if they're standing, which there probably are at this range, then it's going to whiff. In the current patch, the medium version of Deadly Flare is now 4 frames faster, so 25 frame startup. Additionally, if the opponent is at full screen, the move will track and actually connect with them. And it's right on top of them too, so this is a pretty fair buff to Versusia. I mean, this seems slightly obnoxious, but at 25 frames, it is reactable, so you can spot dodge it. You should be able to cross over it as well. We mentioned the heavy version of Deadly Flare earlier, so now let's talk about that as it's time to talk about it. This used to be a full screen tracking move for Versusia. So if you're at full screen, you had this 18-frame unreactable pillar of fire that she could drop on you at any given moment. This basically shut down anyone from zoning her, as she basically ruled this space with an iron fist. The heavy version of Deadly Flare now no longer tracks to full screen, and in fact, it's significantly nerfed. This completely changes the dynamic of Versusia. Instead of being like this full screen, I completely shut you down from zoning and I'm safe the whole time, she now actually has to play at these mid-ranges in order to threaten this option. If you're a zoner character and you're able to throw things from full screen, you can actually do that to Versusia now. That's kind of a crazy change. The heavy version of Nimbus had its lateral knockback increased. That's about as far as you would launch the opponent before. This is the lateral knockback now. The opponent is almost pushed to full screen, which I imagine does a couple of things. In combos where you're trying to use Nimbus, it changes them a bit. We've already shown how the JH follow-up after you do the Nimbus follow-up doesn't really work anymore, and you have to settle for the JM. So Versusia is getting like a little more corner carry in some of these situations, but she's not getting close enough to do triple strike sequences anymore. So it's sort of like a damage nerf. I think a Versusia player is going to have to like really walk us through. To me, this feels like more of a nerf than it is a buff. Medium Samsara has a couple of changes to it. Most of them fall in the category of buff, though there is like a nerf in here, but it's supposed to function as a buff. I'll try to break it down in a moment here. The startup used to be 18 frames. A pretty fast attack here. Now the startup is 22 frames. So it's slower, but the patch notes themselves state this to make it so that it's easier to follow up after you use a Celestial Strike. Let's look at that situation and talk about the other changes. Previously, if you were in the mid-screen and you hit the opponent with a Celestial Strike, a standing opponent, so you couldn't do the links that I was showing you earlier, then your options for following this up meterlessly, without burning a cooldown, I should say, was a little bit limited. You could try to use Medium Samsara, but you would push the opponent pretty far away, and you had 32 frames of mid-air hit recovery to work with. This also meant that in the corner, you couldn't link a close medium. With 3 more frames of midair hit recovery, a reduction in lateral knockback, as well as the changes to the startup of Samsara, you can now actually pick up combos from Celestial Strike, which, don't forget, launches now. Far medium works, and once you're in the corner, while close heavy doesn't work, you can now link a close medium. So it's a nice little bit of a combo buff for Versusia. Again, we've taken away some of her strengths in this patch, so we're seeing Cygames and Arc System Works adjusting her kit to make sure that she still has some compensation for those nerfs. The medium version of Anitya, her down special, has some adjustments to it. The projectile speed used to be pretty consistent all the way through, and the active frames were 36. Now, the fireball starts off slow and then gradually speeds up. It also lasts for additional frames, up to 52 if I remember correctly. So there's a little bit more of a presence to use this move. Instead of throwing out a fast fireball, you're throwing out a slower fireball to control more of the space. She'll appreciate this change as a zoner because, well, that's dead. By contrast, the heavy version of this fireball has been nerfed. It used to linger out for quite a while. Now, the 60 active frames it used to have has been reduced to 36. So it's not really like this lingering fireball that's supposed to hold the opponent in place anymore. It feels like the medium version with its advancing property is doing that job, and the EX version is probably going to be serving as some like combo utility instead. I'm interested to see how Versusia players are going to adapt to these changes. The last change to Versusia happens to both of her supers, so I'm just going to cover them together because they're effectively the same thing. Previously, both of these were pretty good fireball punishes. Her Skybound Art was able to work pretty well in the mid-screen, but suffered at full screen. But that's what you had her Super Skybound Art Cataclysm for. Whenever Versusia had access to this, the opponent was shut down from throwing fireballs, in addition to being shut down from throwing fireballs because she had her pillar online. But if she was able to threaten these supers as well, you could not interact with this character from full screen. For both of these Skybound Arts, once Versusia starts to move, she loses all projectile invincibility. I'm pretty sure everyone can experience what a huge difference this makes in the matchup. With all the other changes to her kit, you can actually throw fireballs at Versusia from full screen no matter what her cooldowns are. She has to get close enough for these to be effective. Greatly reducing her ability to bully someone out for wanting to throw a fireball. Now, if you get close enough, that's when you have to be wary. At full screen, you're pretty much safe to try and zone her however you please. Versusia certainly is a contender for the biggest loser of this patch. She's lost a lot of the toxic strengths that were in her kit. Her ability to shut the opponent down from full screen by sitting there with her deadly flare cooldown, by threatening a full screen cataclysm to punish a fireball, did a lot to just make it like a no interactions contest here, as well as having some really strong EX skills, all the while having some really strong pressure with her Celestial Strike and potential for huge combos. Now, a lot of that has been toned down quite a bit. She does have a couple of buffs here and there to compensate for it, but she's not keeping the opponent grounded forever, so her combo game is a lot more limited. She has to rely on going for a couple more difficult links that don't rely on triple strike, which probably will result in like maybe some net buffs at the end of the day when it comes to combos off of Nimbus. But outside of that, like this is a character who is not going to be as impressive as she was before, especially when you think of like how this far light of hers or 5L of hers no longer clashes with mediums. She's toned down, I think, in some of her more toxic ways, and she should feel like a healthier, more fun character to fight against, but she still has some compensation tools for it. She's not going to be as EX cooldown reliant as some of her medium special moves have received some decent buffs, so I'm interested to see what this character plays like going forward. I feel like some of her matchups are definitely going to change, and I feel like she's going to struggle a lot more against some of these zoning archetypes where before she could kind of just shut them down. We'll see where she stands, but don't get me wrong. This is a worse version of the character for sure, but I think it's a worse version that is healthier and better for the game overall.